The image is seared into our collective consciousness, a reptilian fortress, its back bristling with a shield of interlocking plates. Stegosaurus, the armored giant of the Jurassic. But what if this iconic armor was a catastrophic design flaw? What if its primary function wasn't defense at all? This isn't just a dinosaur. It's one of paleontology's most enduring paradoxes. We see defensive plates, but the fossil record presents us with a structure completely unsuited for the job. To solve this mystery, we must set aside our assumptions and treat this creature as a cold case. Now, let's dissect the evidence and solve the case of this bizarre survivor. Our subject is Stegosaurus stenops, a large, herbivorous dinosaur that roamed the floodplains of late Jurassic North America approximately 150 million years ago. The world it inhabited was a perilous one, dominated by formidable theropod predators like Allosaurus. In such an environment, effective defense was not a luxury. It was a prerequisite for survival, and at first glance, Stegosaurus appears well equipped. It possessed a formidable weapon in its tail, the Thagomizer, a set of 4 sharp spikes capable of inflicting catastrophic damage. The evidence of a punctured Allosaurus vertebra confirms its effectiveness. But the feature that defines Stegosaurus is the double row of large vertical plates, or osteoderms, running along its back. For over a century, these were assumed to be its shield. This is where the case file becomes complicated. When we examine the plates themselves, the defensive hypothesis begins to crumble. Let's look at the fossil evidence on a diagrammatic layout. The largest plates, found over the hips, could reach over 60 centimeters in both height and width. However, they are surprisingly thin, composed of a type of bone that is structurally weak against high-impact fractures. Unlike the fused solid armor of ankylosaurs, these plates were not built to withstand the crushing bite force of a large predator. The internal structure presents an even greater puzzle. If we view a cross-section of a plate, we can see it is not solid bone. Instead, it is riddled with a complex network of grooves and internal channels. In life, these channels would have housed an extensive system of blood vessels. Such high vascularity is metabolically expensive to grow and maintain, and it serves no obvious purpose in a purely defensive structure. In fact, it creates a significant weakness. A predator strike that failed to break the plate could still cause catastrophic bleeding. Finally, there is the matter of placement. Let's overlay a wireframe model of Stegosaurus with the known plate arrangement. We can observe they are situated in 2 alternating rows high along the spine. While protecting the vertebrae, they leave the most vulnerable areas, the broad, fleshy flanks, almost entirely exposed. Any competent predator would simply bypass this dorsal crest and attack the undefended sides. The architectural logic of this armor is deeply flawed. It's too thin, too vascular, and in the wrong place. This is our central paradox, an animal living in a world of giants, equipped with a famous defensive feature that seems biomechanically incapable of defending it. The conclusion from our initial analysis is unavoidable. As primary armor, the plates of Stegosaurus are an architectural failure. This forces us, as investigators, to discard the initial hypothesis and re-examine the evidence from a new perspective. If the function is not defense, what is it? The answer may lie in the very feature that undermines its defensive capability: the extreme vascularity. We must now deconstruct the plate not as a shield, but as a complex biological machine. Let's begin by applying principles of material science. If we create a simple 2-dimensional wireframe model of a plate's cross-section, we can see it is a thin lamina of bone, internally supported by struts. If we run a basic finite element analysis, simulating the bite force of an Allosaurus, the stress concentrations along the plate's edge would be immense. The simulation would predict catastrophic failure with even a glancing impact. The structure is optimized for a large surface area and light weight, not for resisting compressive or torsional forces. This is the opposite of what we would expect from armor. So, let's pivot our investigation. The most prominent clue is the network of grooves covering the plate's exterior surface. In life, these held a dense web of blood vessels. When we use CT scans to peer inside the fossilized bone, we see this network continues deep within, forming a complex internal vasculature. This internal blueprint is the key. Such a system is metabolically expensive, and evolution does not favor costly features without a significant functional payoff. A highly vascularized, broad, flat structure exposed to the environment is the classic design for a heat exchanger. Let's break this down with a diagram of the proposed circulatory mechanism. We hypothesize a system where Stegosaurus could actively control blood flow into the plates. At the base of each plate, a muscular sphincter could constrict or relax, regulating the volume of blood entering this external radiator system. Now, let's animate this process. On a hot Jurassic day, as the animal's core body temperature rises from metabolic activity or ambient heat, the sphincters would relax. Warm blood from the deep musculature would be shunted into the plates. As air flows over the vast surface area, a process known as convection, heat would dissipate from the blood into the atmosphere. This cooled blood would then circulate back to the core, lowering the animal's overall body temperature. Here, we can overlay a thermal imaging model onto the skeleton. The plates would glow brightly, indicating they are the primary point of heat loss, while the insulated core remains cooler. This is not speculative fantasy. We see this precise mechanism in modern animals. The massive ears of an elephant or the oversized bill of a toucan are not primarily for hearing or feeding, but are, in fact, highly vascularized radiators for dumping excess body heat. The engineering logic extends to the plate's arrangement. Why two alternating rows instead of a single central fin or parallel pairs? Let's use a simple computational fluid dynamics model to visualize airflow over the animal's back. If the plates were in a single row or side by side, the front plate would create an air shadow, a pocket of turbulent air that would drastically reduce the convective efficiency of the plates behind it. The staggered configuration, however, is a masterful solution. It ensures that each plate receives a clean, oily, laminar flow of air, maximizing the cooling potential of the entire system. This is a design principle used in the placement of cooling fins on engines and radiators. This system could also work in reverse. As a large reptile, Stegosaurus may have been at least partially ectothermic, relying on external sources to regulate its temperature. On a cool morning, it could have oriented itself broadside to the sun. By flushing blood into the plates, it could have used their large surface area as solar panels, absorbing radiant heat and warming its body much faster than an animal without them. This would provide a significant metabolic advantage, allowing it to become active earlier, to feed or to evade predators. This thermoregulatory hypothesis is supported by quantitative analysis. Seminal studies by paleontologist James Farlow and his colleagues in the 1970s and 80s created physical models of Stegosaurus plates and subjected them to wind tunnel tests. Their calculations showed that the plates were remarkably efficient at shedding heat, potentially allowing the animal to dissipate nearly all of its excess metabolic heat through this system alone. even with only a slight breeze. However, a good investigation considers all angles. Critics of the thermoregulation model point out that other large dinosaurs, like sauropods, lived in the same environment and lacked such elaborate cooling structures. Furthermore, the specific bone tissue type within the plates isn't as intensely remodeled as in some modern fast-growing endotherms, slightly complicating the picture of their metabolic rate. This brings us to a crucial observation. A large, blood-rich structure is not only good for thermal exchange, it is also perfect for display. When we overlay a potential skin texture onto our model, and then simulate flushing the vascular network with blood, the plates could have become brilliantly colored, like the wattles of a turkey. This adds another powerful hypothesis to our case file: species recognition and social signaling. The biomechanical investigation has successfully replaced a failed hypothesis with a robust new model, but in doing so, it has uncovered a second equally plausible function. Our investigation has led us from a failed defensive hypothesis to two powerful contenders: the plate as a thermoregulatory device and as a social display structure. The evidence for both is compelling, and they are not mutually exclusive. This is common in paleontological investigations. Complex structures rarely evolve for a single purpose. To reach a verdict, we must employ a controversy clarity protocol, weighing the evidence for each major hypothesis to arrive at the most probable synthesis. First, let's consolidate the case for hypothesis A, thermoregulation. The evidence is primarily physiological and based on engineering principles. The extreme internal and external vascularity, the large surface area, and the aerodynamically efficient, staggered arrangement all point to a sophisticated heat exchanger. The physics are sound. The primary objection remains contextual. Why did Stegosaurus evolve such a system when other giant herbivores in the same ecosystem did not? This suggests that perhaps thermoregulation, while a clear function, might not have been the primary evolutionary driver. Now, we turn to hypothesis B, the social billboard. The evidence here is rooted in comparative anatomy and behavioral ecology. The plates are large, visually striking, and positioned for maximum visibility along the dorsal midline. Such structures in living animals are almost universally used for communication, to identify members of the same species, to attract mates, or to intimidate rivals. A critical piece of evidence emerges when we compare different Stegosaurian species. For instance, the plates of Stegosaurus are shaped differently from those of its close relative Hesperosaurus. This variation is difficult to explain if the plates were purely for thermoregulation, as the laws of physics are constant. However, if they were for species recognition, such variation is precisely what we would predict. Like different flags for different nations, the ability to flush the plates with blood, making them change color, would have created a dynamic and unmistakable signal. This leads us to a synthesis, which represents the current scientific consensus. The most likely scenario is that the plates were multifunctional. The primary evolutionary pressure driving their size and shape was likely for display. In the complex social world of dinosaurs, a clear signal that said, "I am a Stegosaurus," or "I am a healthy and desirable mate," would provide an immense reproductive advantage. This selective pressure favored larger, more distinct, and more vascular plates to enhance the display. Once this elaborate, blood-rich structure existed, it became a perfect candidate for exaptation, an evolutionary process where a trait developed for one purpose is co-opted for another. The highly vascularized billboard was also by its very nature an excellent thermal radiator. Therefore, The thermoregulatory function was likely a secondary, but highly beneficial consequence of a structure that
Leave your
evolved for social
analysis in the
signaling.
comments below.
It may have even created a positive feedback loop, where individuals with better displays also had a thermoregulatory edge, reinforcing the selection for these traits. We can even partially rehabilitate the defense hypothesis, not as physical armor, but as a tool for intimidation. The large profile created by the plates would have made Stegosaurus appear significantly larger and more formidable, potentially deterring an Allosaurus from even attempting an attack. Our final verdict is that the Great Plate debate is resolved not by choosing one answer, but by embracing complexity. The plates were not simple armor. They were a dynamic multi-purpose system, a social billboard, an intimidation device, and a thermal radiator, all in one. The bizarre case of Stegosaurus reveals a profound truth about evolution. It is not a perfect engineer designing solutions for single problems. It is a tinkerer, layering new functions onto old structures, creating complex, integrated systems that solve multiple challenges at once. The plates are not a paradox. They are a masterpiece of evolutionary multitasking, a silent testament to the intricate and often surprising pathways of life. What is your hypothesis? Do you think the plates were primarily for thermoregulation, with display as a secondary benefit, or the other way around?
Leave your analysis
in the comments below. And if you want to own a piece of this investigation, the detailed 3D model of the plate's internal vasculature we analyzed is available for our patrons via the link in the description.